following interview is being conducted at the Fargo Air Museum on the 9th of November in 2006 in conjunction with the Veterans Oral History Project. The interviewer is Tom Asplund, and the subject person is Lloyd Collins, a World War II veteran. Good afternoon, Lloyd.
Hi, Tom.
Would you give us your name, birth date, and your address?
Sure. My name is Lloyd Collins. Birthday March 4th, 1919. Address 1303 26th Avenue South, Moorhead, Minnesota.
And where were you born, Lloyd?
Page, North Dakota.
And who are your parents?
You have to let me think for a minute. Hattie and Frank Collins.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
We had teachers staying with us when I got married, so they were my brothers and sisters, but none at all.
When did you enter military service?
I entered when I was in college. A fellow that used to come in the Powers Hotel all the time where I played, he'd say, Lloyd, he said, how are you coming on the draft? I said, it's down my neck. He said, I got a real deal for you. He said, they have a radio training course which would give you enough time when you sign up for it to finish your college education. So that's what I did. And it worked perfectly. But a week later, after we finished the second course, we were down at Fort Snelling.
So actually you were inducted into the Army, is that correct?
Yep, that's right. I wanted to go in the Marines. They said, you're too fat. And I wanted to go into they said, try the Navy. Navy said I was too fat. Well, then I was signed up for this radio business, so that worked out fine.
When did you actually enter the Army?
Well, it'll be as soon as I finished those courses. I think on the paper I listed the time I got in. May? May,
I think you stated something about the 8th of May in 42, is that correct?
That's right, that's it.
So you ended up in the Signal Corps, is that correct?
That's right, which was a good move.
And where did you take your basic training?
Camp Crowder, Missouri.
Did you have any additional training other than that Signal program?
The Signal program, we learned how to climb telephone poles, and we learned the code. We were all ready. And what we ended up in was operating a telephone setup in Naples, Italy.
Where was your first duty assignment?
Answering calls from different companies or different outfits.
That was in Europe?
In Europe, yeah.
And what country was that in?
Naples, Italy.
In Naples. While you were over there, did you run into any friends or relatives?
Oh, sure. I went into the Red Cross to play on when I was off duty to keep my fingers going. And this one day somebody came up and stood at the end of the piano. I looked up and then I looked down on the keyboard again, and I took a second look, because here it was Pat Kelly. He and I used to play together on WWII. He said, it sounded like you're playing. And so then we went to operas together, and then when he shipped over to Normandy, I saw him off from Naples over to France.
How long were you stationed overseas?
In Italy and Oran, altogether, it's about 2.5 years, I guess. Because when we got over to Naples, it was 2 years to the day that we arrived and when we left. And the headlines in the Stars and Stripes said, black, what do they call them? Where people, can't remember, it was I'll think of it later on. But anyway, the black market gang was captured, and we kind of thought we were the black market gang. But then an interesting thing, when we got ready to ship out, it was hot down in the hold of the ship. So we all went up and slept on the deck. And of course we were landlubbers, we didn't know that they blew the stacks early in the morning to get all the soot out. And we could have put on a black face show. We were all so dirty.
What was your responsibility as an individual?
I was in charge of the Naples long distance telephone and teletype. I had nothing to do with teletype, but just with telephone. We had 15 stations, the old type, where a light would come on the board, you put a plug in it, you see who it was, and then if you wanted somebody else, you plug in another plug and ring a deal, and that's how you made connection. It was interesting. Most of the time it was a good setup. We had one fellow, Major Man from Firebox, that was a railroad station. A lot of them, they'd call in and what they wanted, their call was the most important call on the whole switchboard, but they weren't. They had to be notified as urgent calls. Another story's come from that. But with Major Man, he would always call up. He said, "This is Major Man at Firebox 43. He said, "I know you've got a lot of calls, but when you get an open line to Rome, would you call me?" And you know who got the next line for Rome. Very polite. In contrast, I had a British major call from Salerno during the 4th of July. And they were firing the ACAC guns and everything that we had in Naples. And I had a call. You want to talk to Naples long distance operator? So I answered the phone. He said, "I saw Naples, are you having an air raid?" I said, "No, we're celebrating the 4th of July." And he hung up on me.
Do you have any other unusual experiences that you recall?
I had a call from a British general, and he was giving my operator real heck for not putting his call through. Kucharski was the operator's name. He says, "Collins, you better get over here. I got a bad one here." I said, "Naples chief operator, can I help you?" He said, "Yes." He said, "The operator wouldn't put the call through for me." And I said, "Well, what's happened? We're booking. We're about 2 hours behind in call." He said, "Well," I say, "Naples." He said, "I have some meat that's spoiling if we don't get it over to Sicily." And I said, "Did you list this as an urgent call?" "Oh, no." He said, "Should I have done that?" I said, "Let's put the call through right now." They got off of their high horse. We didn't like the British too well. Had another one where we had 4 trunk lines from Naples to Rome. And we got a hold of Rome, said we'll each take 2 trunk lines, but keep them busy. Well, Rome wasn't using their lines, so I used them. He calls up, matters than a wet hen. He said, "I say, this is Naples long distance," or it was Rome long distance. And I said, "You're not using your lines. We have to book at least an hour, 2 hours behind." He said, "Well, at Naples," he said, "I was chief operator of the London Telephone Exchange." I came back, I got a little English in me. I said, "It doesn't speak well as a London Telephone Exchange," and hung up. But it was a nice type of service to draw on. And I think I mentioned to you the other day, we had a lot of USO shows come through. Example, Panama Hattie group came in, and they were at our little theater. It was a good show, line up lots of gals. And then they went up to the front, as far up front as they dared go, to put it on for the troops there. The irony of the whole thing was the girls, the chorus line, all became pregnant, with the exception of one little gal, a little white-haired gal. And how I remember her, she came back to our Port One Theater after they had the deal. That's where I found this information out. And she sang, "How much is that doggy in the window?" This real high, squeaky voice. And then we had the light outage in the same little theater when Marlene Dietrich was there. And I was accompanying her on the pit piano. The lights went out. Right away she got a hold of a candle. So I played by candlelight and she sang by candlelight. Red Skelton was over too. He was a lot of fun to work with. He did his usual tricks and routine. He was on a hospital ship in the Bay of Naples, and we had the right contact, so we got him to come and put on a show for us. So it wasn't a hard service. You were away from your loved ones. Most of our group was made from telephone people from Detroit, Michigan. Our head sergeant was from there. He was a full-time Army staff sergeant, Rumchek. We had so many Polish names from Detroit, but he ran the company. He didn't get the lieutenants to say yes, sir, and no, sir, but he kept them in line, which was wonderful, because we had a lot of 90-day wonders come over, and they were basically worthless. One that worked across from my table, he was transferred from a tank battalion. His name was, is it okay to mention names?
Certainly.
His name was Lieutenant Stuzinski. And I'd tell him to say there's a great show over at the Ensa Theater, which was equivalent to our USO, only they were a lot better. They were right from London. He'd call up the lieutenant downstairs and teletype. He'd say, "Lieutenant, Collins tells me there's a good show over at the Ensa Theater." So he said, "Let's go." So he hung up the phone. He says, "Collins, if anyone's looking for us, we're out checking lines." But that's the way the Army works.
You mentioned a little bit earlier something about opera.
Oh, we had tickets practically any time we wanted it to the Opera House. Irving Berlin's show came over, and Irving Berlin was with them. And they did This Is the Army. That was in the Opera House. That was excellent. And then for every Sunday night, we had a hard battle to fight. We went to the opera. And it's a beautiful opera house. But we had to have tickets for it. So our sergeant got me about 8 tickets. He says, "Pass them out to your buddies." Well, I had some good friends who were lieutenants. I said, "How about coming over to the opera tonight?" Well, we were all supposed to attend a, a lecture on diseases. That was a must. Well, we got over there. The officers from our company were lined right up. I was right next to them. And they looked at me and they said, do you know everything about syphilis? I said, "No, I'm not concerned about it." I said, "Neither are we." So we enjoyed the deal. But one thing I remember about the Opera House, when we were through with the war in Italy, that was taken care of. That was announced during an opera. So they opened the main curtains and flew up the scenery, and the doors on the San Carlo Opera House, the huge doors, they opened, and you could see the Bay of Naples from there. They opened that, and then they sang the Italian national anthem, the British national anthem, and Stars and Stripes Forever. And people were crying. Well, it was the end of the war. But I know at our barracks, because we were in an enclosed area. They brought a load, 2 truckloads of Italian soldiers and German soldiers. It was pitiful. These were kids, 16, 17 years of age and younger. And we fed them in our outside area. That was kind of the sad part, when they were using that young kids to fight.
While you were there, did you receive any recognitions or citations or commendations?
Yeah, we got a citation to round on Maurice. We called it a toilet seat, the nickname. And then we got something for overseas duty in Italy, in the Italian campaign.
Do you recall what your pay was at that time?
I don't, because I sent most of it home. I don't know what a sergeant would get then. On my discharge, it's turning brown now, but there was a figure 400 and something, but I didn't make like money like that for just a tech sergeant.
When were you discharged?
It was in the fall of the year at Camp McCoy, Wisconsin. Because right after that, my pen pal, all the time I was overseas, she and I got married. So it was right in that time. I suppose maybe November, something like that.
And your rank at discharge was?
Tech Sergeant, T4.
After you were discharged, did you have any follow-up military service?
Yes, my dad worked in the tower for the railroad, and all the messages headed towards Page came through him. So he called one day, he said, "Lloyd, I got a message here from the Army." I said, "What is it?" He said, "Well, it said if you wanted to continue in the Army, come back when you're supposed to. If not, ignore this request and just stay." So I ignored the request and stayed. Well, if we could have kept the right crew together, with the radio people and the lieutenants, I would have signed up again, because it was a terrific thing. A terrific group of people to work for and with. But that isn't the Army. And so I stayed.
Have you attended any military reunions?
That I haven't. I kept contact with a lot of the people from our company, and they're all dead now. Last one died last year.
Do you remember your serial number?
1707-3106, sir. And that's the way you said it. In fact, I've used the first 4 numbers, my secret code, 1707.
Upon your discharge, did you utilize the GI Bill in any way?
I sure did. Started to work at the WWII Music Company. I think he offered me $200 a month. But with the Bill of Rights, as I was learning the business, the government, I suppose, paid so much of my salary. And then there were skips where DeVoe would have to pay more of the salary, and the government would cut down on what they were paying. That worked fine.
So what was your primary occupation in life upon discharge of the military?
Well, I came back here. I must have done some other schooling though, because I came back here and I started to play in the Powers Hotel. But I was playing at the Powers Hotel before I left. I know I came home, got off the main train, waiting for the dinky train to come to take me up to Page. And I went over to the hotel, and here some of, we called them kids, the waitresses and waiters. They were still there, so I got a free breakfast on Powers Hotel. But
Well, Lloyd Collins' name is kind of synonymous with early days of the Powers Hotel. Will you explain who you worked with at the Powers?
Well, my singer was Peggy Lee, and the Powers Hotel, that was an eating place that people wanted a nice place where they didn't serve liquor, and good cooks, excellent cooks. I remember one fellow, Dick, he took his job was to make homemade soup. And he had one of these big cauldrons, like they used to use in the Army, and he'd spend a couple of days making the soup. That's all Dick did. And they had another one, Marty, who was in charge of the kitchen. He was very, very fussy, which is good. They're not that way anymore. But if a waitress put her hand up to her hair, more than I've got, and they had to go out in the kitchen and wash their hands. And if you were working at the salad table out in the kitchen, you never rested your feet on the bottom rung. You rested your feet on the floor. So it was a well-run place to eat. A lot of celebrities used to come in there. One fellow was speaking out at NDSU. He climbed the Alps. Who would that be? But anyway, he said that the organ and singing disturbed him eating supper. So they served it to him out in the lobby.
Going back to this experience with Peggy Lee, now you played there prior to going into the Army, is that correct?
Yes.
And did you have any continued contact with Peggy Lee after discharge?
Until she died. I'd call her at least once a month. I'd send her a tape once we got the theater organ going. She thought that was fine. But sometimes when she was real sick, she would really sound down when you talked to her on the phone. And pretty soon she'd say, "Lloyd, I got a joke for you." I said, "Now that's a Peggy I used to know." But they invited me to come to her funeral, but that was just too costly, even to the point I would have to get a doctor's okay that she is dead. All this red tape. I thought I was back in the Army. But what we did, we sent a nice, in fact, one of the florists said, I told him what my problem was. And she said, "Well, why don't you do this? It's the beginning of the week before the funeral. Let's pick out a nice bouquet for around $50 and send it to them now so that they can enjoy the flowers before the funeral." So that's what we did.
In your retirement years, do you have any hobbies or have you done any volunteer work?
Oh, a lot of volunteer work, playing in other churches, especially the church that we just adopted at Olivet, one over on 25th. And hobbies, I've got a electric train set, a big one, set up in the basement. Basically, I use an excuse for my grandsons. And when I got it going, they came down, they played with it a while, and then it was time for the football game. That was the end of the train stuff. I've got a woodworking shop, and I guess those are my main hobbies, plus playing at the Fargo Theater. Got the big Wurlitzer organ, and that's fun to see and play. They just gave me a big, just had lunch, big celebration, or how we're going to say it. Recognition of the many hours we spent there redoing the organ. We got up in the chambers, took all the pipes out, and from the heat that they used to use there, it was hard to hang on to the pipes because they were just greasy dirty. We had to throw our overalls away afterwards. And I got stuck behind two pedal pipes, and they had to take the pipes out in order to get me out.
In addition to the things that we've talked about today, Do you have any additional comments or experiences that you'd like to share with us?
Well, there was a major out at NDSU when I was going to school. So I asked him, I said, I'll probably go in the service. Should I enlist or what? I said, you've been in it a long time. He said, let me sum the service up this way. It's an experience I had. I'll never have it again, but I would never want to do it again either. That's about, I guess, with my time in the service, because when I went in the service, my dad was in the First World War. He says, Lloyd, he says, if you can stay out, stay out. He says, the worst thing ever happened in your life. I wouldn't say mine was bad. And I went down to Fort Snelling. Hey, this was great. I knew an organist in town, so I'd go in there and visit with him. And the second day I got in KP, it was hell that day. We did everything except polish nails in the wall.
Well, Lloyd, we thank you for spending the time here today for this interview and sharing your military experiences. And we wish to give you a special thank you for your service to our country.
Well, thank you. I ran into a gal when I went in to get my eyes fixed. And she, just visiting like we are here, and she said, Lloyd, were you in the service? I said, yes, World War II. First time anybody ever did it. She came over to me. I said, what's going to happen? She says, thanks for being in the service. I appreciate it.
Maurice D. Lykke, born November 4, 1925, Fargo, North Dakota.
That's your present address.
Yes, sir.
And where were you born?
At Elk Horn, Iowa.
And who were your parents, Maury?
Martha and Carl Lykke.
Did you have any? Do you have any brothers or sisters?
2 sisters.
Okay.
Honor lives in Maine, and Joanne, my younger sister, lives at Elk Horn, Iowa.
When did you enter the military service?
November of 1942
And where was that?
at Elk Horn, Iowa. I enlisted.
Were you drafted or enlisted?
I enlisted, Thomas.
And you were in what branch?
I was in the Navy.
And where did you take your boot camp?
Camp Lawrence at Great Lakes Naval Training Center, Great Lakes, Illinois.
And do you recall when you started and how long it took?
There was 2 months at boot camp, and then I got to leave, and then I went back and I went to gunner's mate school from there on for 4 months.
So that was additional training.
Yes, after boot camp.
And where was that?
Was at Great Lakes also.
And how long was that? Do you recall?
4 months for boot camp training, for
And-
gunner's mate training.
And this gunner's mate training, what did that consist of?
Well, all the way from small arms, 30 caliber, up to 16-inch turrets that they have on battle wagons.
Where was your first assignment?
From Great Lakes, I went on a train to Norfolk, Virginia, and at that time I was assigned to USS Elden, destroyer escort 264, but we waited around Norfolk while the ship was being built.
When did you, apparently you shipped out with that ship?
Yes, yes.
When was that, do you recall?
Let's see, that would probably be in maybe around, no, maybe it was in 1943, probably, and probably about August maybe, in 43. It was built at Charleston Navy Yard at Boston, Massachusetts, and I was what they call a plank owner. I stayed on the ship all the time until it was decommissioned in 1946 at Stockton, California.
When you were on this ship, what were your specific duties?
As I told you, I went to gunner's mate school, and so my duties were after they used the gun, I had to clean up. We had 3-inch. Our largest gun was 3-inch 50 caliber. We had 40 millimeters and 20 millimeters, and every officer, which was about 9 officers, they each carried a 45, and we had to clean those. My main duty was keeping the guns in shape. And when you're at sea, you get a lot of salt water, and the 3-inch 50s, they recoil probably about 14 inches. You have to keep that slide greased up, otherwise it'd rust out very badly when we get into port, so we had a lot of cleaning up to do on the ship.
What kind of product did you use for this cleaning?
A lot of diesel oil. Diesel, it seemed like worked pretty good. Diesel, we soaked the parts in diesel to clean them up.
Were you ever stationed with any relatives or friends?
No, I wasn't.
Everyone was a stranger.
Everyone was a stranger, Thomas.
Do you recall what your pay was at that time?
No, I don't. I don't have any recollection. I just remember that they took out $17.50 for a bond, and then when I got home, I used that to buy an engagement ring for my wife.
Where did you serve? No, you were on board ship. What area were you serving?
In the Pacific. The ship was, as I said, was made in Charleston Navy Yard in Boston, Massachusetts, and we went down to, from there we went to Norfolk and act as a schooling ship for a month or so. We'd go out, and then the submarines would set their torpedoes on real deep, and then we'd have to phone back and whether they would have hit us or not. And then we did a lot of gunnery practice while we was at Norfolk also. And from Norfolk, we went down I got ahead of myself here. Before that, we went on a shakedown cruise. No, maybe that, I maybe forgotten, but we went to Bermuda for a shakedown cruise. And what a shakedown cruise is, we have to set our, see how much the ship would take, so we set our depth charges on shallow. And then went only about 6 knots. So the depth charges at that time, they broke about every light bulb in the ship, and so we had to go back and get some heavier light bulbs, and then some of the weldings broke also, so we had to go in the dry dock and fix that up for a short while. And then from there, we went through the Panama Canal, and that was the only time we had all the water was rationed because they had to, evaporator condensers had to make fresh water out of salt water. So we only had fresh water about half an hour a day, but when we went through the Panama Canal, there's a fresh body of water between the Pacific and the Atlantic, so the showers were turned on, so we thought that was quite a treat. We could use all the fresh water we wanted. And then we got into San Diego, And half of the ship was given a liberty and the other half wasn't. Probably fortunate that I didn't get a liberty because they said there was a lot of cat houses in Tijuana. A lot of the sailors went to Tijuana. So I wasn't one of them.
Stepping back for just a moment, you refer to this ship having been built in Boston, I think you said?
Right.
Were you the first people on that ship?
That was commissioned. It was the USS Elden. It was the name of it. And Waldo Elden was the name for him. And he was an officer on a destroyer that was sunk. And that's the reason they named it USS Elden. His wife was there, knocked the bottle so when it slid down, so it's commissioned. Waldo Elden's wife.
Now, where did you go after being in Southern California?
Then we went up to Frisco. Went to Frisco, and we were there a short while. And then we went to Pearl Harbor, and out of Pearl Harbor, then we went with escorted many people to Saipan, Guam, Eniwetok, Iwo Jima, Leyte, and many places. And we also escorted troops as well as aircraft carriers. We operated with carriers sometime, 2 carriers and 2 destroyer escorts. The carriers, every time the planes took off, we had to stand guard there in case they had a ditch, and every time they landed, we had to go above. And then they would go out and look for submarines, and then won't let us know about where they were. So we had to drop our depth charges or hedgehog. We had hedgehogs also. The hedgehogs are on the forecastle, and they go out over the forecastle and set a pattern to explode on detonation. And the hedgehog. So it's mainly a submarine ship is what I was on. They had depth charges.
Explain the reason for this hedgehog.
Well, that's for they I think there's probably about 24 of those, and they're right on the forecastle, up forward, and they detonated. They fired them off and go out over the forecastle and get down and set a pattern. And then they also have K guns. We had 6 K guns, 3 on the aft, and then the K gun is one. Depth charge fits on this like this. The depth charge, you put a charge in here, and the depth charge is hooked on here. Charge in here, and then you can send that off the bridge, and then it blows that. There's an arbor that the depth charge is hooked on, and it goes off over the side, each side. And then also on the fantail, there's depth charges, and they roll off too, so you have a regular pattern for submarine warfare.
So you're out on submarine destroying missions.
That's what it was. And then when we were escorting troops, we'd have a certain pattern. We'd go so far one way and so far the other to keep track of it. The sound gear, that ping for submarines, Many times it wasn't, they'd get a school of porpoises and they thought maybe that is some. So I'm sure a lot of porpoises were killed.
How long was your tour of duty at that time?
You mean on that destroyer? I would think I'd be on there a couple of years at least. Yeah, on the destroyer escorts. Yeah. Probably went 125, 30,000 miles. Average speed of 14 knots.
With very little liberty off the ship?
We'd maybe be out, maybe sometimes a couple months. We'd have to refuel at sea. And we didn't get much over in the islands. I do remember one time we got a liberty on one of the islands. And don't ask me the island, Tom, because I've forgotten. But anyway, my friend and I, we'd like to drink beer. And some of the guys wouldn't drink. We each got 2 cans of beer. So we got we ended up playing football in the sand, had a good time.
Did you have any other unusual experiences that
Well, the only one I thought was rather unusual, we were operating with 2 carriers at that time, and the submarines wouldn't waste a torpedo on, they'd want to get that carrier, But we were in such a position that the torpedoes, one of them we saw going forward and one aft. The guy said, well, they weren't torpedoes. He said, they were porpoises. The other guy says, if they were porpoises, that's the first time I've ever seen them with egg beaters jammed up their ass. So I felt kind of uncomfortable at that time.
But you were never hit.
No, we weren't, Tom. We were very fortunate. A lot of destroyer escorts were hit, and kamikazes, you know, when we were over. No, we were very fortunate.
Can you tell us a little bit about that kamikaze? Your experience with it?
Oh, well, I don't. I've never seen one hit, but I do remember that what really kind of probably nerve-wracking than anything, Tom, was when you lay in maybe a bunk about 2 in the morning, that bell start ringing, and bang, 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 man your battle station on the double. You didn't know what the devil might be coming, you know. You get up there and uncover your guns and get them strapped in your 20 millimeters, and then they would say, well, this is just a drill. Secure your guns and go back to your bunk. They do that maybe several times in a week or something like that, you know. And then maybe in the daytime they'd send up, man your battle station on the double, and we get up there, and then they'd send some balloons up, and when the balloons, open fire on, shoot. And then for practice, we used to shoot at those drones, those radio-controlled drones. They were very hard to hit. They could really maneuver. I couldn't ever hit one. I had 2 battle stations. I was on the 20 millimeters and also on the director control for 40 millimeters. The director is like you got bicycle handlebars, and then the 40 millimeter is over here, and every time you turn to a bite, the 40 millimeter follows you right along. And it's a Mark 14 sight, and that's supposed to, all you have to have is a rangefinder, and he sets at the range, and that gyro's in there is supposed to take care of the lead angle and everything like that. That was kind of high-class stuff. Now it'd be obsolete.
Yeah. Was that pretty noisy? Was there a lot of noise?
Well, I could set that 40 millimeter on single fire, semi-automatic or automatic. When I get it on automatic, those guys, they had clips. There's 4 shells in a clip. They had to run around. Them damn shells would be just all over. They're tripping over the empty shells, you know. They'd been that gun turret, you know. So it got to be kind of a mess.
Did you ever attempt to fire upon any aircraft?
No, just one night, Tom. Must have been in Tinian. We fired every half hour. We fired. They said there were some barges that were going over there, and I couldn't say there was. We fired star projectile shells. They go out, then the parachutes, and you could see. And then we'd fire every half hour. We'd fire over on that island there. And the officers maybe enlisted men didn't know a hell of a lot. The officers were kind of in charge. Like I say, this book that Doug Leach wrote, the officer. He didn't never mention any enlisted men, just the officers. That's where I first found out there was discrimination between white people as well as black people.
Did you receive any recognitions or commendations or citations for your time over there?
No. Someone told me you could get a lot of some kind of, what do you call it, battle star, or certain battles you could get those campaign, but I had no desire to get any of that kind of stuff.
Did you have any opportunity to ever see any USO shows?
Tom, I read that, and I don't know whether this is a USO show or not. When I was at Great Lakes Naval Training Center, I saw Irving Berlin. He wrote Dream of White Christmas. And whether that was USO or I don't know. But nothing over in the islands I never saw. Nothing in the islands I never saw. We had on the fantail once in a while we get to see a movie. They put a canvas over the fantail because it's very hot in the Pacific, you know, and so we had to have and then if it come up a rain, so we'd have stay out of the rain.
They had a supply of movies on the ship?
Evidently, yeah. They we had probably about 6 different skippers on our ship. One of them wanted to make good friends of their enlisted men. They didn't want to get mutineers getting thrown over the side, so one of them put on a Coke machine. We thought that was quite a deal. We could get a Coke, you know. Yeah. We went aground one time too. That was over on one of the islands, and see, that sound gear is clear down in the bottom of the ship. It's kind of a big tube, and they wrecked that sound gear. So we had to go in a floating dock. And a floating dock is one where it opens up and you just go in the ship and then you sit, and then they close the gates and pump all the water out. So you sit high and dry in a floating dock, and then they repaired that, and then we're ready to go again.
Would this be located at an island or out in the sea?
Out in the sea. It's a floating one. It floats. It's out in one of the islands. Yeah, you can move them around. Not every size ship can go in one, but this a small ship as we are, a destroyer or destroyer escort. I don't think they could handle a cruiser, but it's a smaller floating dry dock, is what they call it, to go in.
How many personnel were on that ship?
180, and probably 9 officers. Uh-huh.
You were able to eat well?
Oh, very well. Of course, you get into rough sea. We probably are in 2 hurricanes, and of course the tables, they have a little like a little lip here, and then the tables and the chair and the benches fit down in there. Otherwise, they'd slide all over. And when you're in a hurricane, you don't have any coffee pots sitting around there. You got it tied up here with a rope. Otherwise, it'd go all over. And I tell you, I was so sick then. I wished I could have died, and afraid I wouldn't. In that first hurricane we got down, Bermuda's where we first went on a shakedown. We were anchored there, but they kicked us out to sea. See, the anchor wouldn't hold in a hurricane. You had to get out to sea. So that's when the first hurricane. That was quite an experience.
Well, hurricanes are known in the Caribbean, but in the Far East, they're known as typhoons.
Maybe it was typhoon. I'm not sure. Maybe it's probably a typhoon, Tom.
I was going to say, did you experience any typhoons?
Yeah, that's what I said. 2 or 3 probably. Yeah, and that ship of ours, the mast would go down underneath those high waves, and they couldn't even hardly see it. And then it would pitch, and then it would go down, and then it would roll. And then the screws come out, just shudder, when the back screws come out of the water. And then, I'll tell you, that was, and then on the bridge, one place you could watch the expansion on the catwalk. It would go back and forth. See, it's got to give when you pitches down and goes up, and you dip down and you get water on it. It goes clear under the water and gets up in the focals and then sprays all over. You can't imagine how rough that can get.
So the ship was actually flexible.
That's right. That's right. They tell me the Empire State Building's that way too. It gives so much. You probably heard that. But I could see up there in the catwalk that you go back and forth.
After you once got your sea legs, you could still get sick hitting
No, I got over that. But I felt very sorry for the people. Some were chronic seasick and never got over it. Nick Medica was one of them, but finally got transferred. I felt very sorry for the people that never did get over that. I was very sorry.
Did you have any serious injuries that you recall?
No.
When were you discharged?
January 1946.
And what was your rank at that time?
Gunner's mate 2nd class.
After you were discharged, did you ever have any follow-up in military service?
No, I was damn glad to get out of it.
Have you attended any military reunions?
Yes. In fact, just last September I went to Knox, Indiana. One of my Navy buddies, Bill Maulers, had a Navy reunion there. He lives on Bass Lake, and there was 9 of us there. And one of them, Roy DeBoer, had 6 brothers. He has 3 brothers left, and one of the brothers, a wealthy brother, bought a motorhome so he could bring Roy to the reunion. And of course, as we're getting older, a lot of them, if their daughter or son didn't come, they couldn't make it. But we had a nice time. We did have those reunions. I think this is the 6th one I've gone to. We used to have them every other year, but now, since so many are dying, we're trying to have one every year.
What was the unit that has the reunions? The ship
The
itself?
ship, D-264, the USS Elden. And I think there's probably only one or two of the guys who are plank owners like I was that were on decommissioned and stayed down till decommissioned. I was too damn dumb to get transferred off. They just kept me.
Now, you still are in contact with a few of these
Yeah,
people?
in fact, Bill Mahler's the one that had the reunion. He has this esophageal cancer now, the same as I did, and it sounded like it's in his lymph nodes, and they couldn't do any surgery, so he probably doesn't have too long left before. So it was great that we could get together again.
So your contact with these people, the numbers are way down.
That's right, Tom. There's way more dead than live.
Do you remember your serial number?
You bet. 621-5421.
When you were discharged, we had the GI Bill. Did you utilize any?
Yeah, I went to NDSU
And what did you major in?
and majored in agriculture, poultry husbandry. My dad was bought poultry. I said, well, I didn't know what to do. And Uncle Sam paid for my school. He said, what the heck? I just will go to school.
So you got a degree in,
And majored agriculture, right?
and then did you utilize that
Yeah,
education?
I ended up, did several of different kind of work, but finally ended up with the Department of Agriculture and Poultry and Egg Products Inspection in Nebraska and Iowa. And that's what I retired with federal government.
How long were you with them?
30 years.
Do you have any hobbies or special interests?
Well, you're well aware I love to golf, Tom, and there's a lot of widows around that. Got to try to help them out. There's way more widows than widowers, Tom.
Oh, sorry. Did you do you do any volunteer work?
I delivered Meals on Wheels. I do that on Monday and Friday. I take Meals on Wheels. I had a strange experience the other day. I was delivering meals to a lady, Myrtle, and she said, Maury, when were you married? I says, in March 19th of 1949. She says, Maury, she says, I was married at the same time. March 19, 1949. Myrtle's in a wheelchair all the time. Isn't that quite a coincidence? She lives in one of those houses, remember after World War II, they built those houses in Fargo with the squares and enameled kind of, never need painted.
Porcelain.
Porcelain, oh, you know what I'm talking about. That's where she lives.
Interesting. Can you think of any other unusual experiences that you'd like to relate to us?
Oh, I probably could, but I think I've talked long enough.
Do you have any comments or that you'd like to share with us about your feelings and being in the military?
Now, what I feel like now is I wish we could have peace. I've seen enough war, and there's just too damn much hate and not enough love in the world. That's my feeling.
Well, we thank you, Maury, for spending time with us here today for this interview and sharing your military experiences. And we wish to extend a real special thank you for your service to our country.
I did get a thank you from Truman at that time. Maybe you've heard other guys say that. Yeah.
That and a ruptured duck?
Yeah. Yeah, you're all right. No, remember they asked me if you have any, what they have, complaints, or there's a word for it. No, I don't, everything's fine, I just went out of here. I was discharged from World Chamberlain Field at Minneapolis, Minnesota. World Chamberlain Field, yeah. It was a good experience, Tom, but good experience. Of course, my folks had to sign, when you're 17 when you go.
So you went in at 17.
Then I quit school.